All right, welcome everyone to our Lunch with the Boxer series. Today we're going to be covering our first year seminar class with Professor Brent Johnson, and he is phenomenal. He's here to support all of our students, and so he's going to give you a little sneak peek about what our first year seminar class is and answer any questions that you folks may have. So I'll turn it over to Brent.
Thank you, Donna. Hi, everybody. And Sophie, I hope this will be something like feel comfortable to just ask questions as they come to you, but I'll certainly leave some time at the end to fill in, after you've kind of heard some more about what we do with the first year seminar program. Just a quick note about me. My name is Professor Brent Johnson, and I teach out of the English department. And I've been here at Pacific for 20 years. Funny enough, we actually have sort of our staff and faculty awards today, and I'm going to get, I think, a cool little leather binder that says I've been here for 20 years. So it's official, or it will be this afternoon. But I've had quite a few years of that have been spent directing our first year seminar program. And that's what I wanted to talk about today, to give you a little sense of why we have the program and what we do in the program. When we kind of think about the why, if you think about like how you're transitioning from high school to college, there are really, in my mind, two key pieces to that. And that's going to be the academic transition and the social transition. Those two things are incredibly exciting. They can also be challenging. And the first year seminar course is a class that all incoming first years are required to take. And the reason why we make that a requirement is it really focuses on helping you make those bridges between high school and college, academically and socially. What we do in the class, so I'll kind of give you just a real brief overview of how it works, and then like to sort of get you a sense of what are the ways that we attend to, academic and social transitions. Basically, what we'll have typically in a year is we're going to have 18 to 20 sections of our first year seminar courses. Those are all going to be capped at 20 students. So it's a small class. Each class will have a different faculty member at Pacific, as well as a student mentor. And I'll talk about that role in just a second. But both of those leaders in the class are there to help all the students in their section, learn how to read, learn how to write, learn how to engage in critical thinking at the college level. And so that's sort of the gist of the course and how it looks, in sort of that broad sense of things. What you would get over the summer is you will have sort of a list of all the different sections of FYS with a short description of what each section focuses on. So last year, there were some sections of FYS that focused on anime and the sort of hero character or heroine character in anime. And we sort of tie some things in that. So it was like comic books. I did a section on incarceration, and we looked at the prison system in America and talked about, if we kind of think about, I like to call it like wicked problems. And what's a big problem that we can address, understand, and then from that understanding, offer up some ways into it that may, lead to change. So all of the FYS sections will have like a different theme that drives them. And over the summer, you get to sort of choose what are your top three themes that most interest you. And that's where we do our best after that to get you enrolled in one of your top three sections. So that's sort of how FYS starts. What we like to do from there is we will begin, early in the semester with really sort of getting you acclimated to, what does a college level reading look like? When we talk about critical thinking, what is that? And we sort of spend some time actually trying to make sense of those ideas. So I always sort of think of like this course in a lot of ways is thinking about your thinking. And I really feel like if I can have students that come into my FYS class not really knowing, understandably, like how to sort of engage like those college level academics. What I like to do in this class is different than other classes that I teach. Is it's not so much the content as it is you building approaches and strategies for handling content. So we do a lot of time in the class where we spend sort of, thinking to ourselves like, well, what was the value of having a draft turned in for this paper a whole week before it was due? Like, let's think about that. Like, what does it mean to actually, see your writing in stages of development, as opposed to, sort of the classic kind of college ideas that you wait till 2 a.m. the night before to turn in your paper, right? So we sort of try to break down some of those things in this class so that you build good habits, that you build good strategies that are going to help you sort of approach a lot of different topics, a lot of different sort of, skills that you will need in a lot of classes that you're going to be taking at Pacific. So in many ways, FYS is that service course to where, we are very aware of what you will need to have in college to be successful. And FYS is one of those classes that spends some time reflecting on that and preparing you for that. So that to me is, like the academic, component in a nutshell. I also mentioned the social aspect of that. And I think in a large part, there's some really kind of fun things that happen when you're in a classroom with 19 other students who are in the same boat with you. Here you are in this new place and you're trying to navigate, like, where am I? Where do I want to be? A lot of times that'll happen early in college, or you even ask those questions of like, who am I? And this is a place where it lends to sort of exploring those questions with your classmates who are also in that same situation, because you can imagine how it would feel quite different if you were in a class with juniors and seniors, and you're going to focus more on the content itself. And FYS is purposefully sort of guiding itself to where you have this collective group and you're all talking and thinking about very similar things. We also have, I mentioned earlier, the student mentor. Typically, that's going to be like a junior or senior. Sometimes we have sophomores too. And these are students who have been hand selected by the faculty member. They are sitting in on every class. They are there for you to, have a resource on campus, someone that you may, ask really simple questions, or you may have more serious questions, right? And they are the people who are, I always call them the liaisons to different campus services. So if you were sort of, let's say you had, thought you might need some testing accommodations, and that was a concern you had, well, the mentor is going to know who to hook you up with for something like that. Or let's say that you might be struggling in a chem class or something like that. Well, the mentor is going to know that we have a tutoring service on campus that deals with, has tutors in various fields, and will show you how to make an appointment and sign up for, a chemistry tutor. So they can be really valuable in those ways, but they also are going to be handling some of the aspects of college life that are related to time management, to study skills, and they will also help you think about, prepare for your advising session when you're considering like what you might major in or what classes you would want to take next, the following spring, and what would be some strategies you might think about. So there's a lot of sort of like practical things, because we've certainly found, like through a lot of data and anecdotally too, that how well you do in the classroom is very often dependent on what you are doing outside the classroom. And the mentors help in that role. And of course, the faculty and how they're sort of guiding their classes are conscious of that too. A couple other ways that we also strive to build community in FYS is we have really a pretty robust co-curricular program that we have set up. One thing that we've done in the past is we, as a program, we will take students into Portland and which is about an hour away, 45 minutes to an hour away. And we actually attend a professional play at a theater in Portland. Last year, I remember we have what's called the MAX train. It's our sort of public transit system. You can take a bus to a train to get into Portland, and it's a light rail train. And I got on the train with my students, and we rode the train into Portland. And I took them out to get some pizza before the play. We saw the play and got back on the train and got back at night around 10:30 at night. And it's one of those things where when you build these things in and you start to see how the dynamics change, how you get to know each other in a very different way than you do just in the classroom alone. So we have that's built into the program. And then we also really encourage every faculty member to think about other co-curricular events they might build into their course. In the past, I did a unit one time in FYS on food, and we had gone down to, we borrowed a university van, and we went down to a ranch where he did a lot of sustainable practices with his ranching and his animals and his farming methods. And then afterwards, I took everybody out to Burgerville, which is a local, fast food chain that sort of enacts more sustainable practices, even in a fast food, setting. And so that's how I could use my money in that way. So I think you'll find that a lot of FYS faculty, that FYS experience is built in what we call like experiential learning. And that's where you are, sort of getting out. You might know them from elementary school days as field trips, right? But those field trips, I think, are a great place where we sort of step beyond, what we're learning academically, intellectually, theoretically, and we're starting to see how does that play out in the real world, and making those connections between the two. So I think, like in a nutshell, I hope that gives you a good sense of what FYS looks like. How we sort of attend to those real two common goals of building community, as well as that academic transition. There's a lot of other, details and moving parts that I'd be happy to go into. And, or if you have just really basic questions of, what are the kind of themes are there, or how do you sign up, or whatever it might be, I'm happy to address those too.
Thank you, Brent. I remember as a Pacific alum, I loved my FYS class. It was one of my most favorite classes I ever took at Pacific, and it really kickstart my college career. And it was really great to build those friendships and to get to know the college, just the academic and social setting. So for you, Brent, a lot of the students are worried about building friendships. That's like their number one biggest concern, especially coming out of this pandemic. In your experience, how do you feel that this class helps with that?
Well, I was mentioning a little bit earlier, like there's something about that sort of collective experience that happens. So when you are all coming into an FYS section, and you're all in the same position of being first year students, there's like a little bit of that kind of homeroom, but the best parts of homeroom that happen there, where it feels a little bit of a safe space, right? We're allowed to, in FYS, we're allowed to sort of talk about things that may not typically be talked about in other classes. And a lot of that is because the class is sort of built on, this is to help you, adjust to college. And so some of those questions, aren't going to necessarily be related to like a classroom content, right? A subject matter in that way. And so I think like we're conscious in that class of recognizing when we, especially early on in the semester, who are we and where are we coming from? We spend some time, sort of developing like, this sort of community in the class to get us comfortable talking about different topics. And I don't think that's necessarily how most classes work, where, after the first day of kind of going over the syllabus and taking roll and those sort of things, you dive right into the material. FYS kind of eases us into that a little bit more, and we get to know each other quite a bit. And it was funny, I was just looking at some different, the FYS mentors were just turning in their summer letters, which would go out to you all, students over the summer. And many of them reflected, Donna, similar to what you're saying, like in FYS, that's where they started to make some really deep friendships. And I think it's because this is the class where it purposely starts to spend time, giving over its time to building those relationships, as opposed to only learning about the material that's in the class.
I think you hit it right on the money. This is just kind of helping them feel more comfortable to speak their mind, how to connect with people from diverse backgrounds. So I completely agree that FYS is such an important class for students to take. From your experience, so I know you're touching upon academics, really just helping them understand how to critically think, how to write papers, how to just a lot of these skills that they'll need for other classes. What if a student is still struggling after they leave this class after semester with those skills? How does FYS kind of help and support them after? Because I didn't want to leave my FYS class. I felt it was such an amazing class. So talk to me a little bit about that kind of support. If a student still feels like I'm still struggling with these basic skills, and I'm nervous to go to college or nervous to take the other classes that I'll have to take.
Well, I think that so it's funny, it's called first year seminar, but it actually only takes place in the first semester. So the first year is referring more to you as a first year student. So in terms of FYS, sort of going on into the spring, it doesn't do that. But what we really try to do is, my hope at least is when it runs successfully is we've created those relationships with, between you, the student, and the faculty member, that you would feel comfortable in the spring going to your faculty member. Some ways that we do that is we have sort of a required one-on-one meeting that takes place, in mid-September, where you will, have a one-on-one time with your faculty member. That is, this teaching your FYS section. Those are some small ways that we start to build that connection. Then what I was sort of talking about, like some of those examples of the co-curriculars, where you get to know them outside of the class. So building those relationships, and of course that happens with the mentors as well, building those relationships in the fall, I think that's where, if you are still struggling in the spring, I think you would feel pretty comfortable going to your faculty member or to your mentor to talk about some of those things. I'm going to close my window real quick. I hear sirens. Sorry. It's a really nice day here, so I have my window open in my office. But and so I know that that's one way that we do that is, there's that feeling of like what we've kind of built in the fall allows, I think, students to continue that relationship with their faculty and the mentors in the spring.
I completely agree. I would always see, mine was a philosophy professor, and he'd always see me throughout my 4 years. Hey, Donna, how's it going? I'm like, oh my gosh, David DeMoss still remembers me. He was my
That's
FYS
awesome.
professor. And I'll never forget all the Pacific School Spirit he wrote on my first paper, had all red all over it, but just so encouraging on how to get to the next step. So I know that's great for so many students. So Brent, can you talk a little bit about the process again, just to kind of recap all this FYS process, anything that happens in the summer that they should anticipate, all that greatness moving forward as they start FYS.
Right. So basically, once you've once you've enrolled at Pacific and you are registering for classes, you will receive an email over the summer that will basically give you a description of the 18 different FYS sections. So, imagine like a short paragraph that will describe basically what the thematic focus of that class is. And just, again, I was sort of saying like, might give a description of how they're focusing on anime and heroism, right? Or how they're focusing on happiness and, sort of theories of happiness. Those, so you would read through those descriptions and you would select your top 3 or 5 choices that you would like to take for FYS. Then that sort of goes into a whole process. And eventually over the summer, you are going to be notified of which section you were enrolled in. Also over the summer, you will receive a letter from your FYS mentor once they figure out which section you're enrolled in, and your FYS professor. So be on the lookout for those letters, because there's some good information that's given in those. A lot of times, like, it depends on which section you're in. There might be a small assignment that you're asked to do over the summer. I actually give my section Plato's Allegory of the Cave. They read that and talk about how they understand it and the way it applies to where they are in this point in their life of about to embark off to college. And then that gives us, what I do is I use that again as sort of a community building piece. So I actually create like a Google Doc, and everybody introduces themselves, and they give their own sort of, personal take on what the cave means to them. And so right away, we're starting to kind of establish those relationships. And then when we get to class for that first day, we start to meet each other. Hey, I remember you said this, and oh, that was cool how I have this connection of how I saw the cave in this way too. And so there's where, like, what we're trying to do in FYS oftentimes, I think it's a good example of, that's an academic thing. I mean, you're reading like an ancient text there, right, by a Greek philosopher, but you are also building community as you are thinking about what that text means to you. So that would be over the summer. And then FYS, unlike any other class, actually begins on the Friday of orientation. And that's where, when you come to campus, you will actually meet your fellow FYS students, your mentor, and your faculty member during orientation. Now, you start early, and the cool thing about that is you end early in FYS. And our last class is actually right before Thanksgiving break. And we do that purposefully so that you can concentrate on your other classes when it comes to your first finals, in college. And so that's a way that we sort of, structure the class to begin a little early and to end a little early. And Donna, if there's any other details on that might be helpful to students, or if anybody on here would, has some questions about just sort of the process, I'm happy to address those if I didn't.
Yeah, if anyone has any questions, feel free to put it on the chat and then I can answer them. One other question, Brent, some students were wondering, because I heard through other people going through Pacific that sometimes they might have to write an essay over the summer. What's your take on that with FYS?
Okay, so that's you all are going to be really happy to hear this. Is that is a requirement that we used to have in FYS. A few years back, we would have a required summer text, and often there would be a short accompanying reflection paper on that book. We are no longer doing that. We stopped doing that last year, and we're continuing not doing it this year. And there's several reasons due to that. So there's no paper and no required reading, other than there might be the possibility of a small assignment like what I was describing. But that's not programmatic wide. Not every FYS section would have anything required over the summer.
Nice, they're lucky.
Yeah.
I remember writing my paper on the airplane. I remember doing
Yes,
that on the 5-hour plane ride from Hawaii, writing the 3-page paper. So Brent, one thing that we sometimes will get a question is if transfer students can participate in a class like this. Does that ever happen, or is there something else that can support transfer students as they feel like, wow, this is some great things that are happening for the freshmen? What have you heard, or what options do they have if it's not available?
So typically transfer students are not required to take FYS. They will often have other courses that have sort of satisfied that academic purpose that FYS is serving. And so, transfer students, typically are not enrolled in FYS. So, and in terms of like other options, honestly, like the experience I've had is that most transfer students sort of feel as if they've already had a couple of years or a year under their belt, and they're ready to just kind of step right into, their major or other classes that they're wanting to take. Now, if a student were interested, as a transfer student in taking FYS, that's certainly something that we could talk about. And, that's something I'd probably advise them to send an email to Mike Shingle and to start with that and to see, how they might start that process if they feel like FYS would really be something that they know would serve them well.
Yeah, because I mean, like all those great activities that you guys have, I'm sure someone who's coming from a new school will be like, oh my gosh, I would love to
Yeah.
make friends with people. And especially when you're coming from a different place and you feel everyone's
Right.
ahead of the game.
Yeah.
Yeah. So just wondering about that. And Brent, what if a student were to enroll in one of the FYS classes or select whatever topic and they say, you know what, I kind of want to learn about a different one. I changed my mind. Is there an option to do that, or is it pretty set?
That's a great question. It's pretty set. Once you kind of have, made your selection of your top choices, and then you've actually been enrolled in a section, that's pretty much it. It's difficult to try to sort of switch out of FYS. And a lot of that's just mainly because of the numbers of how, like we have this sort of cap at the numbers, and we really don't want to go over the 20, seat number. So, and I'm not saying it's not impossible. It has happened every now and then, but it is a little different than other classes in terms of being able to kind of, switch out and go into a different section. So again, I think that's why I think it's important, like when you get that email over the summer that offers you the different themes, like take it seriously, really look at that and give it some good thought on which themes would most interest you, that excite you. And, don't just blow that off. I think that is an important thing in terms of kind of finding a section that, I think you're going to be happy with.
Yeah, and Brent, if they have questions about like just some clarification on the description, who should they reach out to?
They could talk to me. That would be great. My email is bjohn, BJOHN at pacificu.edu. And then I also had mentioned Mike Shingle earlier, and he's a man of all trades, and he is also a good person to write to.
Thank you, Brent. I know that we had some of those big questions that came through, and for you, is there anything else that students should know about? Anything that you can think of now that we're talking about some of those questions? Anything that you can think of that
I think that so I had my oldest son, he's a sophomore in college. And so a couple of years ago, I was sort of going through that transition as a parent. And I just remember sort of, that real distinct feeling of like, here I've been raising someone for 18 years and I'm handing him off to someone else. And I think, and when I thought about like where he was going to college, I wanted to really trust that they were thoughtful and caring as much as I had been as a parent. And I take that same sort of feeling and philosophy in terms of directing our first year seminar program, is that I see the responsibility that we have at Pacific, that we have as faculty, that we have as staff, to say, all right, you just handed the baton off to us, and now it's our responsibility to help you all grow into the next phase of your life. And so we're really conscious about how FYS is a class meant to be there to help you in that growth. And so I just think that, if nothing, that's a little personal answer there. But I just think that that's the level of sort of thinking and consciousness that we have in terms of like how we want you all to do really well in college. And this class is meant to help with that.
Well, thank you, Brent. I mean, I know you lead with your heart and you really want the best for our students, and students that are watching this and families. I hope you can see that we really care about the growth of your child as they go through this process, and it's a lot to take in. And I really feel like this FYS class, just like Brent was saying, that it really helps them feel more confident coming to Pacific, going into college, answering those questions that they're worried about this whole adulting world. And we're so excited that we have a program like this to help our students. So thank you, Brent, for your time and your dedication and your love and support for all of our students. And yeah, thank you for jumping on today. Families, I hope you learned a little bit about what makes Pacific special and the opportunities that you'll have for your student. But let's give a virtual round of applause for Brent. Yay, Brent. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for your time. And again, if you have questions, you can reach out to him, B as in boy, JOHN at pacificu.edu if you have any questions. And we look forward to seeing you at the next Lunch with a Boxer next Wednesday. Thank you so much, Brent.
Thank
Have a good
you.
day.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.